Okay, everyone, we're going to finish up with kind of a 2-for-1, okay? And this is part 5 of the Getting to Know series. And we're trying to encourage people to get to know certain Christians that most people in history across the board of Christian history have seen as very valuable people in the Christian tradition. Again, there are many, many others, okay? These are just kind of the more popular Christians that people tend to have a lot of good biographies on and good writings on, and I've got some good books on to recommend, okay? So again, this is not trying to leave people out. This is trying to say these are considered typically kind of good places to start, okay? So we've got Apostle Paul, we have St. Augustine, we have Jonathan Edwards and Dietrich Bonhoeffer, okay? These last two fellas, okay, as I'm going to call them, really were alive in the same kind of period of time, and they're part of the same tradition, the Reformation. They're part of that same period, and they're very different in a lot of ways, very different. They spawned two different denominational movements, one the Lutherans, the other the Reformed Calvinists, okay? But at the same time, they're fascinatingly similar. In a lot of ways. They were around, again, alive around the same time. Calvin was a little bit later than Martin Luther. But these two fellas are like very, very helpful to understand. The better you understand them, the better you understand the heartbeat of what it means to be a Protestant, okay? And why did these churches kind of, I wouldn't say separate, but kind of in a way kind of spiral off from the Roman Catholic tradition. Why? There's a number of reasons why. And the more you understand these men and their ideas and their thoughts about Christianity, the more you're going to understand the reason why and where you're coming from. Most people that come out of Protestant backgrounds owe a lot of debt to these guys, okay? So the first is Martin Luther, and Martin Luther was born, later in the 15th century, and then he died earlier on in the 16th century, okay? He is a unique guy, okay? I mean, talk about fascinating life, and very personality-wise, very, very interesting person. So I read a really good biography on him last year that I would commend to you. Though there are smaller biographies that are probably easy to read, this one is not that hard to read. It's just longer, and it's just a little bit more critical. It's not coming from necessarily a Christian perspective, but more of a historical perspective. So it's a little bit less. It's a little bit less trying to be a propaganda for Martin Luther. It's a little bit more kind of a critical and factual kind of discussion about who he was. And it is the book called Luther, Man Between God and the Devil. I mean, what a cool title, right? What a beard. I mean, wow. That's a weird beard, right? That's a little bit earlier in his life before he became kind of the hat guy, a little pudgier type of dude. But this is him when he was a monk. He was actually a monk. He was an Augustinian monk, okay? And God saved him out of the monkery, which is fascinating. So this book is really, really good. It talks about how Luther understood God's work. It's always God doing a work in the midst of Satan trying to tempt and test and try. And I find that that's so helpful. I just think that is more true to a Christian experience. You'd be hard-pressed today to hear a lot about the devil in the Christian church culture. The devil is certain like little do's and don'ts, right? Certain things people do, that's of the devil, like they might say something like that. But there's no real sense of the Bible's teaching on the temptations of the devil, how the devil works. There's really not a mature understanding of how the evil one accuses and manipulates and diminishes. And Martin Luther, I think his life really shows how the devil works, and shows how God upholds his servants in the middle of such intense trial and temptation. Martin Luther, to me, is an exemplary figure when it comes to how to live in between this world and the next, in the midst of trial and temptation. And he has a lot of blemishes on his life too, just like, again, all of us do. You do too, okay? We need to be careful judging other people as if somehow we're the judge of them. We can have thoughts, okay, but it's more we need to learn to observe what's good and kind of spit the bone out when it's bad and disregard. But we shouldn't also try to condemn people just because they're clearly fallen people, right? Just like you and I are. So with that being said, Martin Luther really was part of the Renaissance of Christianity, called the Reformation. And he's well known, of course, for nailing the 95 Theses to the castle in Wittenberg in 1517, 1518, and those disputations that he had, disagreements with the Roman Catholic Church, became world renowned. And it's strange how it came about. It wasn't because of Martin Luther. It was just kind of the providence of God and how he brought this monk out of nowhere into the forefront of the entire world. And there's a lot of other reasons for that, political reasons, national reasons, just providential reasons, God's timing. And again, that's what this book, Man Between God and the Devil, does. It really helps you understand how this little monk, from Germany becomes so popular and so famous. It's because of the timing of it all, really. Not necessarily just the ideas, because some of the ideas that Luther had had already been taught for since the beginning of the church. Okay, so the gospel's never been lost, but it had been hidden, I would say. The Lord has always protected His people and always had His gospel in the sense of doing its work. But up to that time, clearly it had been hidden underneath a pile of works and other junk that Martin Luther kind of burned a hole through. And talking about a firebrand, this guy is crazy. He goes after, he does the business, okay? So fascinating character. Martin Luther is so helpful. And again, for those of you that might be a little older, that might, how is Martin Luther similar to me and different from me? What is his thinking? Where is it kind of differ from me and where does it agree with me? A book came out just last year that's really helpful on this. It's called Luther for Evangelicals by Paul R. Hinlicky, a very well-known Lutheran theologian. And this book does a great job of basically just kind of saying, what's important for us in our evangelical kind of thinking, and what's important for us, like the Bible and witnessing to people, and God's atonement on the cross, and this new birth that we talk about all the time. Where is Luther on those things? And then Luther has his own little thoughts, like the creed and the Christian life, and the Decalogue, the Ten Commandments, and catechism for teaching, like his perspectives. How do they mesh with us? And it's a really good book. It really helps you understand where he appreciates kind of things that we appreciate, and kind of where we need to learn to appreciate him and his differences from us. Okay, so very good, helpful book. And we're going to finish by giving you all a recommendation on one other Christian who came a little bit after Martin Luther, from 1509, if I remember correctly, to 1560s, I believe. Why do these works not have basic biographies of these guys? And this guy's name is John Calvin, and I think it was 50. I think if I remember, 1509 to 1564, I think is what it was, or something like that. But John Calvin was, and he is, in my estimation, kind of 1B of St. Augustine's 1A. So you've got St. Augustine at the top of great Christian theologians. And again, if I had to be real technical, Apostle Paul would be number one, but non-biblical, okay, is what I mean here. St. Augustine would be 1A, John Calvin would be 1B, in just my thought, okay? John Calvin is maybe the greatest theologian to come along in the last 500 years. And why I say that, I don't have time in this little get to know you segment here, but basically what I want to say is this. He understood how the Bible, is one book. Every other theologian before that really was always trying different ways of teaching that. But I think the way that John Calvin teaches it as a biblical theologian, he makes better sense of it. He does it in a more helpful way. He doesn't treat the Bible all as allegorical. He treats it more seriously, the way that we would as a historical document. And so he is really more profound, I think, when it comes to treating the Bible with dignity. Okay, he sees the Bible as one story. He doesn't find as many problems with the Old Testament and the relationship to the New Testament as lots of people like to make a big beef about today, which is you're not reading it right is the problem, and that's how John Calvin would say, you're reading it wrong. Okay, and so I love the way he treats the Bible. I just think, to be honest, he understands how to use the Bible and to teach the Bible. That's, to me, why I love him so much. The second part is because he sees the center of the Bible as Jesus himself. That's why I think he's so commendable. He sees the center of every story in the Scriptures to ultimately lead you to either the need for or the revelation of Jesus. Who is Jesus? He's the center of every story in every part of the Bible. Okay? And again, that's another reason why I love John Calvin. I think he's so important. And then lastly, I think he's so helpful because of the person he was. He was so involved in his culture. He was a person who actually set up schools, elementary level schools, like we would call them today, secondary schools, seminary schools. He was really behind all of that. He was behind setting up the first hospital in Geneva. He was a humanitarian. That's what we would call him today. A philanthropist. He was involved clearly with the city council. He was involved with the ethics and the social programs of the day. His way of going about his Christianity is really why I'm a Presbyterian. He makes it commendable to be involved in the civic world and to involve ourselves in a Christianly way. Not just to kind of be in the culture, but to be in the culture for Christ. To be a witness in the culture, but to not see the culture as just 100% dark and negative. But you see the culture as an opportunity to witness to the Lord Jesus Christ. And you do that in a way with everything that God gives you. You know, your wealth or your poverty, your status or lack of status, your personality or your blandness, whatever it might be. But he was always encouraging that kind of appropriation and engagement with the world. I think John Calvin is the best way I can say it. He is a biblical Christian. He's someone who sees the Bible more distinguishedly. He doesn't see it as this kind of magic book, which is kind of what a lot of fundamentalist Christians see it as. It's kind of magical book with special powers. You know, it's really a book that's full of God's promise, but it's to be lived in this world. It's to be a Bible that's lived in the world, not just to be memorized. And I'm like, that's a cool thought, you know, yay for religion. It's a book that really commends us to live in the world for the Lord Jesus Christ and to teach that religion faithfully in the way we live in it. And I think that his life is so commendable. So I have two books I would recommend. Again, another book in that Armchair Theologian series called Calvin for Armchair Theologians. Again, really, really, really entertaining. It's got like all these little pictures of Calvin in it that are really, really helpful. Again, I think that it's kind of cartoonish, but that's fun. That's fun. And that's a really good one. For those of you that are a little bit more serious, I want to know kind of what does John Calvin really think? This book is actually by T.H.L. Parker, John Calvin. Just to make sure you don't miss it, John Calvin, you know, kind of cool book here. And this book is basically what does the Institutes of Christian Religion teach? It's kind of like a summary of what the Institutes, his big known work, teaches. And so this is really helpful if you really want to know like his thinking about, you know, what is he about? Like, that's not very long, you know, it's like 150 pages, 160 pages long. Really good book. And then lastly, again, I've recommended this before, I'm going to keep recommending it though, is his Institutes of the Christian Religion. There are 6 different editions, okay, from 1536 to 1559. And, you know, there are some people that get kind of really worked up about, you know, all that stuff. We're not scholars. Pastors are not really supposed to be necessarily scholars of certain specific things. We're called to be in the know about a lot of things and to be wise about how to use them. We're kind of equippers is what pastors are. We're not supposed to be just scholarly, you know. So for those of you that are wanting some scholarly take on this, sorry, that's not what this is, okay? But I am going to recommend to you one edition of the 6 that's the best to me, okay? The other, if you can follow my thumb here, there it is. There is the final version, 1559 on my thumb there, right there, 2 volume. Those are great. They're harder to read. They're more academic. The notes are more in depth and more intense and everything like that. So I would recommend for every Christian to have this edition, the one that Banner of Truth put out back in, I think it was 2016, Christian Institutes of the Christian Religion by John Calvin, 1541, and translated by Robert White. And I just think that this edition is outstanding. One, the translator does a great job of making Calvin come to life a little bit better. His words aren't changed, okay? It's a translation, it's faithful, but he's trying to use words that more we would resonate with, so it's less dry, and it's a little bit more lively, and it's really good. Very, very helpful. I mean, I read through it so easily every time I've read it. I've read it all the way through 2 times, and I just find it so arresting and devotional and helpful. It's just really, really good stuff. So I would recommend those to you if you're interested in John Calvin, that little armchair book, to get to know him a little bit if you've never read anything about him. If you've read something about him or you're like, I've read Wikipedia, maybe you want to read something a little bit heavier, a little bit more important is this book. And then if you want to read John Calvin for himself, get the Institutes of Christian Religion, 1541. So that ends our 5-part Get to Know series. And I would love to commend to you all many others, but I don't have that kind of time just to do this stuff all day long. But those 5 episodes St. Paul, St. Augustine, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Jonathan Edwards, and then kind of the Luther and Calvin at the very end there. Those are just, I think, very helpful starting places for a lot of you to get more familiar with what it means to be a Christian and how to live a Christian life and to think as a Christian more in this world that we need. We need Christians that are willing to think and live in this world, not just read the Bible and study it and memorize verses, but to actually think Christianly and live in a world in a attractive way that testifies to Jesus Christ in our lives and brings other people to know Jesus, okay? So I just want to encourage you all with that. I hope it's been helpful for you. It was fun.